Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to welcome you today to the first public lecture of 2018, delivered by Professor Edmond Dounias of the French Institute of Research for Development, IRD. I had the opportunity yesterday to spend a few hours with the professor and with his colleagues in biology and forestry, and to learn about the outstanding work they are doing at the LIPI and the Center for International Forestry Research, C4, in Bogor. So I am very enthusiastic at the prospect of attending his talk today. This lecture inaugurates the third edition of the lecture series entitled Humans, Territories and Societies, through which every month since 2016, our French scientists in the humanities and social sciences have been given the opportunity to share their most recent research and discoveries. Delivered in either English or Indonesian, these lectures aim at highlighting the French contribution to global knowledge about Indonesian history, cultures, languages, arts and heritage. I am happy to see that research partnerships between France and Indonesia are growing in number and strength. Now these public lectures are being live streamed through Periscope and Facebook, and they can also be replayed on the YouTube channel of the Institut Français d'Indonésie, something I encourage you to do whenever your schedule keeps you from attending in person. These recordings will also be useful as results for the research of the studies of the students and of lecturers in Indonesia. It is therefore a pleasure and a privilege to officially open this 2018 edition of the lecture series Humans, Territories and Societies. Le professeur Edmond Dounias, the floor is now yours. À vous et bonne année à tous.
Thank you very much, His Excellence, for this nice introduction, and thank you everyone for coming in such a large numbers. With a title like this, you anticipate that my talk will be at the crossroads between ecology and anthropology, between nature and culture. This is the main posture of researchers in ethnobiology who explore biocultural interactions at the interface between natural sciences and cultural sciences, and how these two domains influence each other. But don't worry, the notions of ecology that I'm going to present are very accessible. On this first slide you can see the two players of my talk of this evening: the wild boar of Borneo, filmed with a camera trapping, and the Penang Hunter-Gatherers of Borneo, filmed here by Georges Bourdelon, a French anthropologist, in 1956. And I hope that the screen is not going to be too shaky. When we talk about societies which value pigs, and especially domesticated pigs, this field is quite richly documented, especially among populations living in Papua, the Melanesians, the Malay and the Proto-Malays. In these societies, pigs, and especially domesticated pigs, are rarely consumed, and they regulate the relationship that these people entertain with their nature, with the neighbors, and with the supranatural world. These pigs intervene in transactions, especially wedding and bride wealth, in war and alliances, in trade exchanges and services, and crop material. Examples of societies which are considered pig cultures in Papua, in the Sakude of the Mentawai Islands, and the Asmats also in Papua. The culture of these pig societies have been first documented by Roy Rapaport, and I strongly recommend you to read his famous book Pigs for the Ancestors, and where he describes the cultural importance of pigs among the Tsembaga of Papua New Guinea. From an ecological perspective, it's interesting to mention that these so-called domesticated pigs circulate freely within the forest, within the proximate forest, and the raised sows can mate with wild boars. As a consequence of that, there is continuous mixing of genes between the domesticated pig and the wild pigs. And this constant mixing of genes is a means to breed a huge diversity of local pig populations among this society. And a consequence of that, the diversity of pig populations in Papua New Guinea is not very well known so far, and there are so many different populations. When it comes to wild pig culture, the story is much less documented. And it's a shame because the wild boar, for populations like the Punan of Kalimantan, I'm going to talk about them later, and for instance the Suku Punan in Sumatra, the boar is a key resource to address the biocultural interactions between these forest-dependent people and the forest environments. And the relation of these people with wild boars is definitely a long history. We know that an ancestral pig species existed in Borneo in Eocene, circa 14 million years ago, and the rise of the birded pig species, and I'm going to talk to you about this birded pig. The rise occurred between 2 and 5 million years ago, and there are some strong assertions that wild boar was hunted in Borneo over the past 35,000 years. So it's a long story, and you can find also paintings in Borneo showing this importance of wild boar for these societies. So let's go to Kalimantan. Let's leave the French Embassy building in the right of this picture. Let's leave Java and let's go to Borneo and to the Indonesian part of Borneo, Kalimantan, especially in Kalimantan Timur, eastern Kalimantan, near the city of Malinau, which is a Kabupaten now. And the story will be between this city of Malinau and the watershed of a river called the Tugu. So let me first introduce the Penang Hunter-Gatherers, who are the last hunter-gatherers of Borneo. So you have the map here of Borneo. You can see which part of the island is still intact forest in dark green, and this intact forest corresponds mainly to the habitat of the Penang Hunter-Gatherers. These hunter-gatherers are about 9,000 people living in the Malaysian sites, Sarawak and Sabah, and nearly 10,000 living on the Indonesian site in Kalimantan. And less than 5% of these former hunter-gatherers are still nomadic today. Why are they no longer nomadic? It's because the forest environment of Borneo has dramatically changed over the past century. Borneo, as you know, is the most extensive forested part of Asia, and this is the forest cover in Borneo in 1950. This small animation is going to show you how the forest cover evolved since 1950. And our expectation for 2020 is that the forest will only cover 33% of the island versus 92% in 1950. So the deforestation is occurring very rapidly and very drastically on this island. The drivers of deforestation, you know them quite well. I just remember them in a few slides. Logging industry. I'm going to explain you why logging has a huge impact on forests in Borneo specifically. Other drivers of deforestation are mining, charcoal for instance, but also gold mining, and you can imagine the pollution with the use of mercury to extract gold from the soils, from the formerly forested soils. Another driver is plantations, for instance, for pine oil, but also pioneer Sweden agriculture linked to transmigration program from overcrowded Java islands to the periphery. We should not forget, for the time being, and so forest fires, and so is the El Nino. You know about this El Nino phenomenon, which is described by scientists and which can provoke very severe droughts in a very irregular manner. And these severe droughts can be causes of massive forest fires, like the one that occurred in 2015 in southeastern Borneo, in this area. So many cumulative causes of massive changes in the forest environments of the Penang Hunter-Gatherers. Let me introduce you the Punan. And the work that I'm going to show you are studies based on studies that we carried out in the 2000s. So it's not just data fresh from the oven, it's works that have been carried over the last 15 years. So the Punan Tubu are called Tubu because they come from the Tubu watershed. And in the late 1970s, the government of Indonesia strongly encouraged forest hunter-gatherers to leave the forest and to resettle near the city. Some Punan of the lower part of the Tubu watershed accepted this invitation by the government and resettled near the city of Manila. These Punan now live in downtown. They can enjoy all the urban facilities, access to markets, access to school, access to dispensaries, not yet, but still expected access to equitable access to job opportunities. But cities does not only bring facilities, it has also trade-offs. And the Punan village, which was on the periphery of the city, is now totally absorbed by the expanding the boomtown of Malinau. And this raises a lot of problems in terms of land tenure, and of course the use of pesticides to maintain crop yield, crop production, because these populations can no longer shift the Sweden's in space because the space is now constrained by the city. So they are now exposed to new problems, to new diseases, to new pollution forms. Another part of the Punan community of the Tubu watershed refused to answer to the invitation of the government and decided to stay in Upper Tubu. So these forest Punan are still, the livelihood of this forest Punan is still pending on forest resources, daily forest resources, which the area is still quite preserved because it's very hilly, it's very difficult to extract log from this forest. So this forest is not really protected from overexploitation. And the people have access to all kinds of forest products and clear water, and they enjoy life in the forest, although they claim that they have the feeling that they have been forgotten by development agencies. So trade-offs between living upriver and downriver. Going upriver takes time. It's quite difficult. You can watch the film from Bordeaux in 1956. Going upriver was really a heavy task. It could take several weeks, and you can understand by watching these images how difficult it was to paddle upriver. Today we have engines, we have temple, Ketingting, but as you can see on the video down there, it's not that easy to go upriver even today. So technology does not resolve all the problems. And going to the first village can take between 2 and 5 days from Malinau city, just to give you an idea. So we have these two communities who share the same origin, the same language, the same culture, but live today, 40 years after responding to the call of the government, live in totally different environments. So it was an ideal situation for scientists, for ethnobiologists to analyze the trade-offs between life in the forest, and life in the city. And that was the topic of the research that we carried out in the 2000s. A few slides to give you a situation of the life of the Punan hunter-gatherers today. In terms of life expectancy, you have the pyramid of age on this picture, and you may notice that less than 2% of the total population of the Punan are more than 65 years old. To give you a comparison, this percentage is 7% for the whole Indonesia and is about to reach 24% in France. If we consider child mortality, the mortality is not the same whether the Punan live near the city or whether they are in the remote areas. And the more remote you are, the higher the percentage of child who are going to die before the age of 5. From 7 near the city up to 36% upriver. So it means that among all these children on this picture, 1/3 are not going to live to reach 5 years old. As a comparison, child mortality for whole Indonesia is 2.7% and it is 0.4 for France. Considering illiteracy, the percentage differs between men and women and increases from proximity of city, it's logic, to remote settlements. And as a comparison, again, illiteracy for whole Indonesia is about 5% versus 1% in France, just to give you a point of comparison. Regarding economy, this is what Punan people earn on average, a household will earn on average a year. And we compared the revenues between cities, semi-remote and remote sites. Regarding agriculture, as you can see, there is no strong difference between the locations. Regarding forest products are easier to collect when you are in a mid-distance from the city, because if you are in a remote place, you cannot sell your products. So you have to be in proximity of the city to sell your products. And the main difference in terms of revenue comes from what we call off-farm activities, shops, small industry, small entrepreneurship. And of course, these activities are much more developed near the city than in the remote areas. And when we look at the position of Penang Hunter-Gatherers vis-à-vis the poverty line, which is globally admitted to be $1 per person and per day, we can consider that 83% of the Penang Hunter-Gatherers are poor. But if we compare the situation of the Punan to the poverty line of East Kalimantan and not to the rest of the world, the percentage of poor Punan is reduced to 39%. The main question that comes to mind, and which to me remains still unresolved, is why these populations living in such rich environment continue to be so poor. And it's a really challenge for development today. These Punans are confronted to contradictions. Of course, they enjoy life in the forest, they want to continue hunting, they want to preserve their cultural specificities, they want to have clear water in the forest, and at the same time, they legitimately want to be part of the modern world. They want to watch TV, they want to wear jeans, they want to drink Coca-Cola, like everybody. So here is a Punan trader who is contacting his fournisseur via satellite phone. So this is also this is also present in Punan society, and these are contradictions. These are objectives which are extremely difficult to conciliate, and we are today confronted to schizophrenic societies, and it's a problem for every hunter-gatherer society around the world. It's the same for the Pygmy people in Central Africa. It's the same for many societies, Amerindian societies in Amazonia, Amazonas forest, to try and conciliate things which are totally in opposition to each other. And this cartoon quite summarizes the this schizophrenic perception of these people. We tried hunting and we tried gathering, but now we usually eat out. So that was the introduction of the Penang Hunter-Gatherers. Let's look at the different other players of my story. These people live in a forest, and this forest of Borneo has some particularities. The first particularity of this forest is that it is dominated by a single tree species called the Dipterocarpaceae. Forget about the name of the family, but just retain that one family of trees represent nearly 80% of all the trees you're going to find in this forest. And Dipterocarpaceae are extremely interesting for logging. So, because there is a dominant family, and because this family is interesting for logging, there is a heavy logging pressure on Borneo forest. You can extract much more logs in 1 hectare in Borneo than in anywhere in the world because of this domination of a single family. But the main point with this family is that this family has a particular feature, which is what we call the mass fruiting, and I'm going to explain you what is mass fruiting. Mass fruiting means that fruits are going to be produced irregularly during the year, in space and time. You will have places in the forest with massive fruiting and other places where no fruiting at all. Second, these fruitings happen simultaneously. When you are in a place where trees are fruiting, 95% of the trees in this place are going to fruit at the same time. So you will have massive amount of trees or fruits falling to the ground. And this phenomenon is going to happen on a very short period of time. Sometimes the fruiting season will just last 10 days, 2 weeks maximum. And the last point, but not the least, is that this fruiting is not synchronic from one place to another. You will have a mass fruiting in one place, 3 weeks later, another fruiting in another place, 3 weeks later, another fruiting in another place. Each time massive, each time extremely located, and each time very short in time. Why do trees react like this? This is what in ecology we call the predator satiation strategy, or it is called as well safety number. It means that when all the trees fruit at the same time, there are so many fruits that predators cannot eat all of them. And this is exactly the strategy of the gnu in East Africa. When these mammals migrate all together, these are millions of individuals following the same path. So many individuals that even if you have a crocodile or a lion killing one of them, the quantity will solve the problem. It is also the strategy for salmon. When salmon goes upriver for spawning, you have millions of salmons which go upriver at the same time. Some of them are going to die on the way, some of them are going to be eaten by the predators, but the majority will reach the final destination. And this is the strategy of the dipterocarp trees from an evolutionary perspective. They massively produce fruit at the same time, and the predators cannot eat all of them. And if a predator likes this fruit, it will have to migrate, to move from one place to another to find his favorite dish. A consequence of this phenomenon is that trees, dipterocarp trees, don't have to invest energy in protecting their fruits. You know, there are different ways of protecting your fruits. You can make a mechanic protection, or you can develop secondary chemicals, poisonous, so that the predator cannot eat the fruit. But producing these defenses is extremely costly for the plants. In that case, because the fruits are produced massively, the tree does not have to invest into these defenses. As a consequence of that, these trees are extremely edible. easy to digest. No chemicals, no protection. You take it, you eat it, you digest it. That's it. End of the story. So you can imagine for an animal which depends on these fruits for its survival, these fruits, the animal don't have to develop strategies to digest this fruit. These fruits are easily available as far as you are at the right place, at the right moments, in the right forest. And for that, you have to migrate. And this is exactly what happens for the wild boar of Borneo, because this fruit is the main source of food for the wild boar. So let me now present you the wild boar. You all heard during the Cold War about the Bay of Pigs located in Cuba. It was a lie. The true Bay of Pigs is in Indonesia. So you have here the true Bay of Pigs, and you have two species of birded pig. One, it is a Palawan birded pig in Philippines. The other species is what we call the Sunda birded pig. So you see in red this location, and within this species of Sunda birded pig there are two separate subspecies. One is called the Western birded pig, mainly in Sumatra, and the other one, the one I'm going to talk to you about, is the Bornean birded pig that you can find in Borneo and in peninsular Malaysia. So our friend, the pig, the birded pig, has developed ecological features to adapt to the constraints that I presented to you earlier about this mass fruiting of the dipterocarp trees. First of all, it has to be omnivorous, because there are times where there is no fruit, and this mammal has to feed, even if there is no dipterocarp. And it can feed on fungi, it can feed on roots, it can feed on carrion, it can feed on soil invertebrates, it can feed on small vertebrates, etc. So it's a good response. Being omnivorous is a good response to this constraint of the dipterocarp mass fruiting. Then this pig can live in very wide range of habitats. You can find it on beaches, you can find it on estuarine swamps, you can find it in fields, secondary forest, and intact forest as well. This pig has also to, because his favorite food is sometimes lacking, it has to compensate, and it compensates by having a lot of piglets per litter. You have here a picture of a wild boar nest. Then it has to have a short gestation period. It means that these piglets have to become independent very rapidly and not depend on their mother for feeding. Then you can also have 2 litres per year when food is abundant. So when food is abundant, reproduction is extremely active among the pig population. The age of early reproduction is below 18 months, which is remarkable for a mammal of this size. That's another strategy to adapt to these constraints. Another important strategy is to convert the foods into fat deposition in the skin. So as soon as the food is eaten, it is converted and stored in the fat deposit of the body. The growth rate is very high, and this population has also high flexibility. Sometimes they live alone in the forest, sometimes they live in small groups, in small family, 4 or 5 individuals, and sometimes they can join flocks, herds of sometimes more than 1,000 individuals. So this flexibility is also a good answer to this pressure of the dipterocarp forest. And they also synchronize the birth peak with the fruit drops, which makes sense, of course. Lastly, they have a morphology which is adapted to travel. They have to migrate. Okay, we need to have the morphology which is adapted to that. And a few characteristics of our morphology is long legs, and they are also excellent swimmers. You can watch this capacity to swim in this small video where you can see 4 pigs which are crossing the river. I come back on hunting techniques later on. Let's talk about the ecology of this strange mammal. So it has a migratory behavior. You understand now why. Why is it moving all the time in the forest? Moving from 8 to 22 kilometers per month during 4 to 6 months each year. And sometimes these movements are part of a broader cyclic migration which can cover more than 600 kilometers. They can migrate, as I told you, in small groups, but also in very large flocks that count more than 1,000 individuals. It's a fantastic disperser because they eat when they walk, and by eating they also disperse seeds. So they are key in dispersing the seeds of the dipterocarp trees. They are brothers. They eat the lower vegetation in the understory of the forest. And by doing this, they improve access of tall trees to the soil nutrients. You know, there is competition to nutrients. You have trees, you have vines, you have small plants in the understory. If you remove the competitors, all the benefits of these nutrients goes to the trees. Which trees? The dipterocarp trees. And they are fantastic foragers. They forage the soil. They look for invertebrates in the soil. They look for rotten wood to fill in the soil. And by doing this, they are going to alter the soil physical properties, and they will speed up, accelerate the decomposition of organic matter and incorporation of humus of plant residues. This humus, which is incorporated in the soil, will become these soil nutrients which are necessary to feed the trees and the vegetation in the forest. So they are definitely fantastic ecosystem engineers. By migrating, they disperse, they browse, they forage, and they maintain the life of this ecosystem as engineers. They are gardeners of the Bornean forests. Just to give you an idea of how important and erratic the migration of these boars can be, these works made by Caldecott, it's dating back to the 1980s, but the first very accurate study about the migration of wild boar, showing how the wild boar migrated in Upper Baram in 1983, and how they progressed 2 years later. So it's totally impossible to anticipate how the boars are going to undertake the migration. And of course the populations of the Bornean forest has developed the capacity to anticipate and to anticipate the boar migrations and to know where exactly to wait and hunt them. These boars, as you can imagine, are also of utmost symbolic value for the inhabitants of the Borneo rainforest. First of all, they have a bird and a mustache, which is human traits. This is the only animal which has such beautiful bird, and this is something they have in common with humans. Second, they share omnivory with humans. Very few mammals have such omnivory. Generally, when we ask what is the difference between humans and the other mammals, because we are mammals ourselves, the difference is omnivory. And then there you find, in the middle of the forest, another guy who is omnivore as well. They are socially malleable. They can live alone, and sometimes you will find a solitary boar in the forest, sometimes a couple, sometimes a small family, 6, 7, and sometimes very, very large groups. And that's another characteristic that they share with human beings. For all these reasons, they are objects of rights, extremely important for the spiritual life of the people of this forest. They mediate the relationship between the humans and the supernatural forces, and you will understand why they have such a role later on. They are used for sacrifice to seal alliance, especially between the Dayak and the Punan Hunter-Gatherers. The Dayak are the farmers of Borneo, the Kenya, the Merap, the Lulaye, etc., from the Dayak group of farmers in Borneo versus the Punan Hunter-Gatherers, and there are alliances between these different groups for ages, and pigs are sacrificed to mark, to seal this collaboration between these different ethnic groups. And the most powerful and dreaded spirit is embodied in the wild boar heading the migrating flocks. Generally, the male adult has a white collar, as you will see in a few videos, and he's the leader of the group, and the leader of this group is considered as a mighty spirit, and we never kill the leader of a group. You can kill those which are going to follow this leader, but never kill the leader. This symbolic value is expressed in every daily life of the Punan. There's no one single day, there wasn't not a single hour without talking about pigs. It's the major focus of stories, of conversation when you are among the Punan. And when you ask children to draw the forest, to draw their environments, in 95% of the drawings, the white boar will be there. It's a paramount element of the life of these forest people. Another aspect is that there are very few natural predators, except the hunters, of course. And as you can imagine, migration in large flocks, it's a bit as well a strategy of predator satiety, or protection in number. When you have thousands of individuals moving in the forest, no predator is going to approach them. And a solitary male is 200 kilos. So you can imagine the different effects it has when it fights with the hunting dogs, for instance. But sometimes it happens. A boar can be killed by a predator like a giant python in this picture. Most importantly, and that's one of the highest issue for the Punan, this animal has developed partnerships with the other wild animals. When the wild boar migrate in the forest, they will eat different seeds, they will eat different forest products, and they will waste these products behind them. And all these products which have been abandoned by the boar or digested by the boar are easy food for the other animals. So when the boar migrate in the forest, there's always a colony of other animals which accompany them. And in return, these animals will alert the boar if there is a danger. This is the case of many songbirds. You will have plenty of songbirds living around wild boars. And because of their position as birds, if there is something wrong in the environment, the bird will sing and inform the boar that there is a danger around. We observed strong collaboration between wild boar and these different beautiful birds, which are on the right side, the Asian red-eyed bulbul, the crested partridge, the bulbous pheasant, but also partnership with gibbons, with monkeys, with macaques, and as well with orangutan, as you can watch on this video in a national park, where you see this kind of closeness between orangutan and a wild boar, without attacking each other. The Indian muchak is a deer of the forest which hounds like a dog when there is a danger. So there are many occasions and partners to alert the boar that there is something wrong in the environment, in exchange of all this food that is dispersed by the boar behind them during their migration. So it's a win-win partnership. And you know that salt ponds are very important for mammals. They need salt to survive in the forest. But not all animals are going to visit the salt ponds. There is a sequence among animals. The first ones are the monkeys, early in the morning. They come from above the trees, they can check if there is anything wrong around, and they will be the first going to the salt pond. Then there will be a succession of animals coming to the salt pond, then the deers and others. And the last to come is the boar. And the boar can come only if all the other animals have gone to the pond before and told the boar, there's no danger, you can go to it. So it's very difficult to hunt boar at the salt ponds because you have to come very early in the morning before the first monkeys come to the place. Then you have to hide and not move and watch all these animals coming one after another to the ponds, and you have to wait until 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and then finally the boar come, and then you have your target. But if you moved in the place where you were hidden, all the other animals will just give the alert, and the boar will never come. That's why the Punan never accepted me to come for hunting in salt ponds, because I cannot stand 15 hours without moving. And so the hunt is never successful if they have a foreigner with them. So they politely refuse. So as you understand, through this partnership with all these wild animals in the forest, you may understand now why the boar has this symbolic role as mediator and messenger between the humans and the forest spirits. An animal which has such collaboration with birds, monkeys, deers in the forest is a special animal, is a messenger. So you have to respect it. And this explains this role. And this animal is also the seed disperser of very emblematic plants that you all know in this room. Of course, you all know about the rafflesia, which is the largest flower in the world. You all know, I hope you like it. If you don't eat it and give it to me. Durian, fantastic fruit, amazing fruit. And also the ilipennets, which belong to the Dipterocarp family, and which is a source of butter for the people. And as you can imagine, the fatness of these fruits, the ilipennets, tenkawang, how important it is as a source of fat for the boar. And the boar is a key disperser of these resources. Remove the wild boar from the forest, forget about the rafflesia, the durian, and the ilipennet. Let's talk about hunting. As you can imagine, the Punan have developed a whole strategy to catch their favorite meat, source of meat, with a lot of respect, but it's the key source of meat for these people. So they can ambush near the salt ponds without you, if they want it to be successful, and without me. They can ambush near the fruiting Dipterocarp trees. They can also track down following the footprints of the wild boars in the forest, and they can also stalk using a blowpipe, as can be shown in this small video there. So these different possibilities to catch a boar is also a way to adjust strategy with regards to seasons, with regards to mass fruiting periods of the time, and with regards to the migration strategies of the boar. Done. Another way to catch the boar is to ambush along the river. I told you that the boar is a good swimmer, and when they cross the river, of course, don't kill the first one, don't kill the leader, but you can catch those who are going to, which are going to follow the leader, as shown on this short video. And you can also hunt, and this is probably the main technique of hunting. As you can see, a wild boar which is surrounded by dogs, and dogs are extremely careful because they can be severely injured by this mammal. Dogs are extremely important, not only for hunting. Just one slide to tell you that the dog is the key hunting auxiliary, but it's a long story, and I promise you another conference specifically on dogs, if you're interested. Dogs is key for these societies. There are plenty of stories about dogs among the Punan. As you can see, the dogs are members of the households, so the people share their meals with the dogs. It's very common to see a Punan child, sharing his plate with the dogs as members of the family. And you could see in this video by Bordelon a hunter coming back from the forest accompanied by his dogs. Another time. So life is changing in this forest, and hunting boar is affected by these changes. Nomadic lifestyle is no longer possible, or harder and harder for these forest hunter-gatherers. But when you were nomadic, it was much easier to follow the wild boar migration. Today, most of the Punan populations are sedentarized, and sedentarization has changed the activity schedule and the gender division of labor within this society. And it's much less convenient today to hunt wild boar. You have male activities on the left, female activities on the right. It's cumulative activities up to 100%, the different categories of activities, traveling, leisuring, going to the field, etc. And because these people are more and more sedentarized, the time that is spent in the forest, here in purple, is decreased compared to the past. And because they are sedentarized and cultivate, the women spend a lot of time in the Sweden, in the fields, and much less time in the forest. So migrations in the forest by these formerly nomadic people is mainly carried out by male groups, while it was carried out with the whole family in the past. The women no longer participate to hunting expedition, and it has totally modified the lifestyle of these people and the possibility to adjust to the wild boar migration. So finding a boar and hunting a boar is much more difficult today because of this changing lifestyle than in the past. Let's look at bushmeat capture around the year. This graph is interesting because it shows the fat deposition, the fatness of the boar that is captured. And this fatness is measured using the phalanx. This is the unit that you use to measure the fat thickness of the boar that you captured. And this fat thickness fluctuates over the year. There are periods where the boar are extremely fat because there are plenty of dipterocarp fruits. There are periods of the year where their favorite food is missing because they are omnivorous, they can survive, but fatness content is very low. So it's less interesting for the people to eat wild boar during season of poor fatness. And then the success depends also on the year. You have here two periods of hunting at the 6 months interval. The number of expeditions carried out per day is not the same during the year. There are periods of the year where you hunt more frequently than in other periods because you are engaged, occupied in other activities. The success of hunting is not the same. You have periods where the success is very high, 68%, and sometimes hunting success is very limited, only 22%. The contribution of wild boar to the total number of animals you can catch varies throughout the year. Sometimes it represents more than 80% of the total animal you will capture. Sometimes there are less than one animal out of two is a wild boar. And then the type of boar that you're going to catch differs over the year. In some period of the year you will catch female, sometimes pregnant female. In some other part of the year you are going to catch male. So the quality of the meat will be affected by the type of wild boar you are going to capture, and also will be affected by the quantity of fat within the skin of the boar. So you can eat boar all the year, but it will the quantity will fluctuate and the quality of the meat is going to fluctuate as well. Just to give you an idea of the bushmeat consumption in Borneo, we estimate that the potential of wild boar as a sustainable source of bushmeat in Borneo would cover 50% of the needs in protein for the Borneo population. As you saw on the previous slides, wild boars represent 47 to 83% of the total captured animal. But if you consider the biomass, don't forget that a wild boar can be 200 kilos compared to a monkey, which is just 2 or 3 kilos. 97% of the total biomass of captured meat in the forest is from wild boar. And then if you look at the quantity of meat consumed by these people, it fluctuates from 146 grams to 454 grams per person and per day. This is a world record. Nowhere in the world people eat such a great quantity of meat daily per person. It's a world record in Indonesia that you didn't hear about. Compared to African pygmies, who are renowned forest hunter-gatherers, you can see that the quantity of meat which is consumed by the pygmy person daily. The city Punan, those who accepted to move to the city, eat only 15 to 35 grams of meat each day. And the old Punan living in the city had a nostalgia. They remember this time where wild boar was so abundant, and now they are craving for it, but it has become very rare near the city. And just to give you a point of comparison, the quantity of meat consumed by French people are renowned to be heavy meat consumers. As you can see, we are far from the world record. So, as you understood from my presentation, these birds are sacred animals for the people, the natives of Borneo, but they are hated by people who are not originated from Borneo, especially the trans-migrants for religious reasons who don't consider wild boar as an acceptable food. And there is a conservation paradox in that, because when we consider the distribution of boars in Kalimantan, they are endangered where they are cherished because of deforestation. And when deforestation occurs, the boar installed near the villages, installed in the outskirts of the cities, installed in the secondary forest, and they can proliferate in very small patches of secondary forest near villages. And when they proliferate like this, they become pests on the fields. And so they are considered as pests, and they are proliferous pests where they are hated. And these are the kind of bombs which are used by trans-migrants to kill the boar without eating it. This is just to give you an idea of the distribution of the boars within the different type of forest. And along with deforestation, the proportion of boars in secondary regrowth and freedom is constantly increasing. To conclude, I try to explain you that the fate of the forest, the fate of the people, and the fate of the wildlife are tightly intertwined. The wild boar conservation, if you are interested to conserve this animal, the sustainable management of this dipterocarp forest, and if you want to preserve the culture of the Punan, all these three elements are inseparable. You cannot deal with one without tackling the two others. You have to consider the problem as a whole issue. And as you can see also, archaeology, anthropology, ecology, and conservation biology are necessary to be combined to understand this inseparable relations between forest people and wildlife. And the wild boar, in that sense, is what we call in ecology a keystone species. What is a keystone species? In ecology, a keystone species is a plant or an animal that plays a unique and crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions. This is a metaphor taken from architecture. This is the keystone in architecture, and this is the central element of the edifice. And as such, without the keystone species, the ecosystem would be dramatically different and cease to exist altogether. If you remove the keystone, the whole system is going to collapse. If you want to preserve the forests of Borneo, if you want to preserve the identity and the culture of the Borneo people, Borneo natives, you have to preserve the wild boar, because it's a keystone from an ecological perspective. But it's also a cultural keystone. As I tried to show you, the wild boar is a focus of tale, belief and practices for these people. It's revealing the Punan cultural identity through the relationship with the natural environment. When the Punan talk about the forest, they always will talk about the wild boar. It has a role of transmission of knowledge and in the conduct of rituals. There is a recurring mention in the discourse, this kind of linguistic profusion. If you want to have a conversation with a Punan, you have to talk about the boar. The boar will come first as a constant rhetoric topic in the conversation. It is central for analyzing these interactions between culture and nature. It's also revealing the local adaptive strategy to the changes of the environment. When the environment is sick or doesn't work well, the wild boar will tell you about it. So it's a sentinel species informing you about the changes of the environment. And it will certainly influence the pragmatic commitment of the Punan society into environmental management policies. If you want these people to take part in the preservation of the forest, you have to make sure that the wild boar is part of the story, is part of the process, and the Punan will follow. If you want to read more about the cultural role of animal as keystone species, I recommend you this document. If you're interested, you can send me an email. I will, with pleasure, share it with those who are interested by this publication. And well, next, what is the next step? Well, this animal is still mysterious. I gave you a few examples of what we know, but there's a lot we don't know about the wild boars. There are gaps in knowledge about this strange large mammal. And we don't understand when the mammal aggregates or disaggregates during the migration. Why does it sometimes stay alone? Why is it sometimes just in small family units? Why do they sometimes merge into huge flocks? We have few ideas about this process. And for sure, folk science, what the local communities know about the wild boar can help the academic science to better fill the gaps and also to implement realistic conservation programs. We need academic science to work in close partnership with local communities and to to accept the validity and the importance of local knowledge. And we need to combine, we need to associate this different knowledge if we want to find the right solutions to preserve the forest. And this is my take-home message to you. I hope that I convinced you that the wild boar is a thrilling animal, and if you like it, like I do, please, I invite you to join the Wild Pig Specialist Group. The Wild Pig Specialist Group, there is a website dedicated to the study of wild boars, and all the knowledge that we have communicated about these animals are updated among this group of specialists. I hope that you didn't find my talk too white, boring. I had to make it. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Edmond, for this presentation. Now, if you have questions, feel free to ask him if you want, both either in Indonesian or English, as Edmond speaks both. And after that, there is a little refreshment outside.
Thank you, Mr. Dounias. My name is Andi from Faculty of Communication, Universitas Pancasila, and the State Islamic University of Jakarta. And my question, maybe a little bit common. You started your presentation by telling us about the ethnicity, the ethnic people in Indonesia, starting from Papua and Melanesia and Proto-Malay, and you didn't mention about Teutoro Malay, which is probably, or some people believe that actually people who came later destroy or over-dominated the people who came before, and that's the whole story about this part of the world, including in Indonesia. So my question is to what extent that these later newcomers and over-dominated, in particular in this case, you also talk about the Japanese migrants who went there, and then of course there's a paradox, as you mentioned, that at the same time preserve the pigs, the boar, but at the same time they're killing them. But these people, of course, because of religious reason, do not eat pig, and then they see this boar as dangerous for their life. And then more and more the Japanese people send there as migrants, including as a logger, because they are, of course, the business people are mostly from this area, and then dominated, and of course taking the logging as the source of life of people out there, and consequently the war also is extinguishing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I just would like to say that it is far from my intention to blame the transmigrant. The transmigrant are forced to live because they leave a place which is overcrowded. They leave a place where access to land has become difficult. They leave a place where poverty has increased. But the fact is that they enter lands, they enter territories which are totally different from the place where they come from. And because they are not native, they will have different impact and perception of this environment, which is totally legitimate. It's just different cultural origin, and different cultural origin will have a distinctive impact on the environment. But the fact is that because they are not native of these places, they will have actions on the environment which are not rarely sustainable, just because this is not the place where they grew up and where they were born. And I understand the situation, of course, but it definitely contributes to the degradation of the forest in Borneo, and the different perception that they have of the wildlife, and especially of wild pigs, is another dramatic consequence of the changes of these environments. But again, I understand these people, and I would not like to be in their situation at all. Yes, madam?
I would like to say in bahasa Indonesia. Nama saya Rike dari Jakarta. Saya cuma mau tanya, sebenarnya babi hutan ini bisa dikembangbiakan seperti orang hutan, tidak sih seperti itu, kemudian dilepas liarkan supaya jumlahnya menjadi lebih banyak dan bisa menjadi asupan makanan untuk orang Punan. Apakah seperti itu? Bisa yang ingin saya tanyakan seperti itu aja sih. Terima kasih.
I'm not sure I fully understood your question. If you could speak a little slower, just to make sure.
Yang ingin saya tanyakan, apakah babi hutan itu bisa dikembangbiakan seperti orang hutan, kemudian dilepas liarkan supaya menjadi asupan orang-orang Punan lebih banyak lagi gitu misalnya, apakah bisa seperti itu?
No, it's not possible because, as you understand, the life of the white boar depends on the maintenance of the forest. If you don't have the dipterocarp forest anymore, you will not be able to maintain the white boar. So it's a system, it's a whole system that has to work together. You need to maintain not only the white boar, and there's no possibility to reintroduce it if the dipterocarp forest has disappeared. So without the dipterocarp forest, which is specific to Borneo, there's no way to maintain the wild boar. I hope that I made it clear. Yes,
I have one
who has the microphone?
Yeah. Thank you. My name is Ahmad. I am from Bogor Agricultural University, Bogor. I'm interested in white boar ecology because I also study this subject. As you said before, that the main factors that influence distribution and migration of white boar population in Borneo is dipterocarp mass fertile. But according to another previous scientific reports in Jaramakot Natural Reserve in Sabah, in Sarawak, Malaysian Borneo, one of that influence the distribution, migration and abundance of large mammal is natural salt licks. So large mammals commonly has shortage in essential minerals in their diets. So they could not obtain some essential minerals from their diet from the dipterocarp foods. So they obtain the necessary for of essential mineral is come from natural salt lick. So I'm curious to know, did you see or did you find any usage of natural salt licks in your study site of white boar in Kalimantan Timur?
Okay. I'm interested to read more about this study. What I can answer is that the salt ponds don't move. They are always at the same place. And they are always accessible with more or less over the year. During periods of droughts, it can be a problem to access these ponds. But globally speaking, and besides specific El Nino events, drought events, these salt lakes and ponds are accessible permanently. What I observed in Borneo is not migration to access these, but daily movements. The animals have to go to these places on a daily basis, and there are many salt ponds in the different located, scattered in the forest. So there are clearly daily movements of all the mammals because they need effectively, and it's a key element considered by the hunters to catch the animals. They know that animals have to go to the salted lakes and ponds. But this, to my opinion, and from what I understand in Kalimantan, is not the main driver of seasonal migration. it's a key element to consider the mobility, the daily mobility of the animals, but certainly not from the place I know, the seasonal migration, which is mainly driven for the white boar, not for all the mammals, because not all the mammals eat dipterocarp fruits, but for the white boar and for all the colony of animals which follow the white boar during its migration. It's the dipterocarp fruit which is the determining factor of the migration. But as I said at the end of my presentations, there are more question marks than answers, and probably we need to take into consideration the differences between different forest ecosystems throughout the Borneo island, and there might be probably different situation in Malaysian sides of Borneo. So I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm just saying that from the part of Borneo that I know, it's not the major driver of migration for the white boars.
Okay. May I ask question?
Don't hold the... Yes, who has the microphone? Yes?
My name is Ami Pramitasari. I'm journalist, copywriter from Tempo. I just wanted to ask you a basic question. You doing ethnography, like I just want to know about the research methodology. How long you stay in Kalimantan, and do you have any difficulties to join with the local people in Punan tribe or Punan village, the people, and how to adjust with the situation that it's not easy, you know, to join with the culture, with the habit, and how did you convince that you're doing research in that area? And do you explain more about C4? I heard about C4, but I'm not quite understand what the C4 is. This project, right? But I'm not really sure what it is.
I'm going to start with the last question. C4 is a Center for International Forestry Research. It's an international organization specialized on research about forestry, and we have a few colleagues of C4 who are present in this room. And C4 headquarters are based in Bogor, in Indonesia, here in Java. C4 is does not only provide high-level scientific results, but is also very influential among decision makers in producing infoglyphs and other documents which are easily accessible by the decision makers to take decision about the forest. So it's not a project, it's a permanent organization which was created in 1993 and which is based here in Indonesia. Regarding your previous question, as I mentioned, going to Upper Tubu takes a while. It can take 2 to 5 days to reach the first village, and there are quite a few villages upriver. So it's definitely not the kind of place where you go early on Monday morning and expecting to be back home on Friday. It doesn't work like this. You have to spend time in the place, at least just because it took you time to go there. And then building relationships, strong relationship with the local people is like everyone. You can cross somebody in the streets and say hi, and have a friendly exchange with the person, but this person will not necessarily become a close friend, because before you reach friendship with this person, you have to meet the person again and again and again and spend some time with this person. It's the same with the local communities. If you want to be accepted by the local communities, you have first to respect them, you have to spend time with them, and you have to be a trustable person. Meaning, if you say to these people, I'll be back in 2 months, you must be back in 2 months. If you are not back in 2 months, the person will say, well, he's not a trustable person. He promised us he would come back, and it's been 6 months and he never appeared again. And you will distrust the relation with the people, and if you have not a trustable relationship with the people, you won't have good information from them. So fidelity, trust are key to if you want to work among local communities, and you have to be omnivorous. You have to like everything and accept even foods that you would not imagine you would put in your mouth one day. If you accept that, that's fine. You can work everywhere in the world. Food is key to establish relations between the people. And when a woman serves you food and you say, wow, enaxically, it's the beginning of friendship. So, yes, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Babi from Minister of Science and Technology. So I come here for the meeting, join for the meeting. I think the title of the meeting, Babi Hutan and Manusia, di Pedalaman, Kalimantan. That's right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know the species of the Babi Hutan. My question is, Babi Hutan the same like Babi Janggot or not yet?
Okay.
This species especially for the Babi Hutan and the species for Babi Janggot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. There exist about 12 different wild boar species in Indonesia and near Philippines. And 2 out of these 12 species are what we call birded pigs, so the Babi berjenggot. 2 species, one which is that you can find only in Philippines, and the other one which is endemic of Indonesian islands, Borneo and Sumatra. Then within this species you have 2 subspecies, but what we call birded pig, Sus barbatus, is only 2 species of wild pigs out of the 12 that you can find in Indonesia and neighboring. And the other species, I'm not going to give the names, you can find them in Papua, in Maluku Islands, in Sulawesi, in Java. There's a species of white boar that is found uniquely only in Java Islands, and many others. Most of these wild boar species are very, very specifically located. Some of them have an habitat of just a few million hectares. They're very small areas. And then you have the situation in Papua New Guinea. It's a black box. As I tried to explain, there's a lot of gene mixing between what we consider as a domesticated pig and what we consider as white boar. The distinction between the 2 is extremely difficult, and this permanent integration of genes is a source of extreme diversification of boar species, and the situation is not clear for Papua New Guinea.
Someone else?
Alors, avant tout, permettez-moi de demander votre excuse. Justement, j'apprends le français par la radio, par la télé. Alors, j'ai tellement envie de savoir est-ce que mon français était compris ou pas par les oreilles françaises.
Mes oreilles vous ont très bien compris.
Et la question que je voudrais vous poser à propos de sanglier.
Oui.
Chez nous, à Jawa et Sumatra, nous considérons comme les ennemis de paysans. Alors, comment avec le regard de tribu Punan et Dayak, et comment ils regardaient, c'est une menace ou quoi? Et le sanglier, mais jusqu'à maintenant, je ne vois pas la photo de tigre, les animaux sauvages avec 4 pattes. Est-ce qu'il y a à Kalimantan, à Borneo, les animaux so fast. Les tigres, par exemple, les panthères. Merci.
Okay. So the question is about the fact that in Java and Sumatra, white boars are considered as pests and enemies of farmers. And as I tried to explain you, the Punan are mainly hunter-gatherers before being farmers, and as hunter-gatherers, they highly value white boar as a source of meat, even if they recognize that it can be a pest for the garden. But again, trade-offs. They prefer to value it as a source of meat and accept and tolerate the degradation of these animals on their Sweden fields. The presence of tiger in Borneo remains unresolved question. There is no tiger for the time being in Borneo. There are many stories in the oral tradition of Borneo native people evoking an animal that looks like a tiger, and I couldn't find in literature strong evidence of the presence or the absence, past presence or absence of tiger in Borneo. I'm not a specialist, but and from what I know, it's still a question of debate until today.
Excusez-moi, la dernière. La dernière. À nos jours, nous regrettons beaucoup parce que beaucoup de forêts, des sommets qui ont été complètement détruits. Vous pouvez me dire, est-ce qu'il y a encore la forêt qui est encore vierge, entre parenthèses, c'est-à-dire intacte? Dans quel pays? Merci.
Alors oui, il y a encore de la forêt. The question is about, is there still intact forests in the world, and if yes, where? There are still, as I presented maps of Borneo and the deforestation process in Borneo, and the area where the forest has not been cut so far are naturally preserved because it's a very hilly and slippery region. And until now, loggers, it is very costly for logging companies to extract wood from such places. They try by helicopters, they try different techniques, but it's so costly that they prefer not to do it. So there is a natural preservation of this very last part of Borneo, and where you can find undisturbed forest, and interestingly it corresponds to the habitats of the most remote Punan hunter-gatherers, and this forest until now has been preserved just because it's too difficult to access. As you know, technology is evolving rapidly, and I'm afraid that the logging company will find a solution sooner or later.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions and your answers. Now I invite you all to share some food in the lobby.
Thank you everyone for your participation.